The broadcast arrived on every channel in every dialect, urgent and unmistakable. Help us, please. They're on their way. We are powerless to halt them. For 3 days, the plea repeated across Earth's communication arrays. Researchers, military figures, and top officials assembled in urgent conferences to analyze this astonishing alien contact. The signal originated from a star cluster roughly 50 light-years distant, yet its translated form reached humanity flawlessly. It must be a trap, General Matthews argued, slamming his palm against the table. No extraterrestrial culture should be this conversant with our languages. Dr. Carter, director of Genolinguistics, quietly disagreed. Their transmission contains built-in translation frameworks. It's intended for comprehension by any species able to receive it. This is a sincere distress signal. High above Earth, the battleship Terminus performed its routine patrol. Captain Stephen Parker surveyed the blue planet below, unaware his fate was about to be drastically altered. His craft was Earth's newest military warship, created for deep space missions and equipped with weaponry that humanity had developed through centuries of internal warfare. Captain, his communications officer spoke up. There's a priority message from command. Straightening his uniform, Parker approached the main screen, where the somber visage of Admiral Johnson materialized. Parker, you've heard of the alien broadcast? The Admiral asked. Yes, sir. Everyone on Earth is talking about it. We've chosen to respond. The Terminus will be our first contact envoy. Parker's heartbeat quickened. First contact, words humanity had anticipated for ages. Why select us, sir? We're a combat vessel, not a diplomatic cruiser. Admiral Johnson's gaze darkened. Because that transmission is a cry for help against the threat that's killing them. And if we're entering potential peril, I want our best ship out there. 3 days later, the Terminus readied for departure. In unison, Earth's governments had determined to answer the summons. This was humanity's opening to engage with any interstellar society beyond their solar system. From the bridge, Parker addressed his 400 crew members. We have no idea what awaits us, or who sent this call, but we know they're in need, and Earth has chosen to assist. This journey may be perilous. It will also redefine human history. The Terminus activated its trial-faster-than-light engine, vanishing from Earth's orbit in a flash that briefly eclipsed the Sun. Weeks went by, and they arrived at the coordinates embedded in the message. A colossal station orbited a lush blue-green planet. Its graceful design revealed transparent sections filled with gardens, utterly unlike humanity's pragmatic spacecraft. We're receiving a hail, the comms officer reported. The main screen lit up, displaying a slender, four-armed being with shimmering skin and wide eyes that grew even larger at the sight of humans. You came, it murmured, voice relayed through the same translator that had deciphered their cry for aid. We never expected a response from your kind. I'm Captain Stephen Parker of Earth's vessel Terminus, he responded. We answered your call for help. The alien's form quivered faintly. I am Ambassador Lane of the Galactic Coalition. Our signal was sent galaxy-wide. Yet we never imagined that Deathworlders would respond. Deathworlders? Parker repeated. Your planet is designated a Deathworld by our records. Too hazardous to risk. Your gravity, atmosphere, microbes, wildlife, and even your species' aggression, all lethal by our standards. Exchanging uncertain looks with his team, Parker inquired. Then, why seek our assistance? Ambassador Lane's 4 arms interlocked as though in prayer. Because what's coming for us is worse than anything, even you. We refer to it as the Void Swarm, a force that devours everything, and our weaponry cannot defeat it. The Coalition Station's docking bay was enormous, built to host vessels from countless worlds. The Terminus seemed oddly menacing among the vibrant, streamlined ships, its shape dark, angular, studded with weapon turrets. Leading a small contingent onto the station, Parker encountered Ambassador Lane awaiting them alongside a variety of alien life, each more surreal than the last. Some floated, others ambled on several limbs, and one was composed of crystalline matter. Greetings to Harmony Station, Lane said, maintaining a polite distance from the humans. Please forgive our wariness. Your biology disturbs us. Parker offered a courteous nod. We understand. We come peacefully and to help. A crystalline entity advanced, refracting light through its transparent structure. I am Elder Collins of the Council. Your ship, it is a war vessel. Yes, Parker admitted, a battleship, created for combat. Whispers spread among the aliens. One small 6-eye being fainted, collapsing into its colleague's arms. Lane's voice wavered. Your entire craft is intended for warfare. We heard rumors that Deathworlders constructed such things, but witnessing it. You requested our intervention against the threat that's killing your people, Parker explained. Were you expecting scientists, ambassadors, perhaps? Collins's crystalline surface flickered. Not soldiers. Surveying the lovely station devoid of armaments or fortifications, Parker realized these people had never experienced warfare as humanity did. Take us to your command center, he said. Show us who we're fighting. Harmony Station's core chamber featured a 3D map of the galaxy, hundreds of green points signifying coalition worlds. At the edge of their territory, an expanding red cluster was advancing. The Void Swarm appeared on the frontier of known space, Lane clarified. We cannot detect sentience in it. It only consumes. Parker leaned closer. How swiftly does it advance? 17 planets annihilated in one cycle. Elder Collins revealed billions dead. It spares nothing. Your defenses? Asked Lieutenant Brooks, Parker's tactical officer. Sharing uneasy looks, the aliens admitted. We only have deterrence, Lane said haltingly, enough to discourage hostile species, but never intended for actual war. Parker's face hardened. Let's see footage of the swarm. The hologram changed to a planet besieged by what appeared to be a vast insect cloud. Thousands upon thousands of car-sized creatures coated the surface, consuming vegetation, fauna, even infrastructure. They break down all biomass to spawn more of themselves, Lane said. Our weapons hardly slow them. Speechless, the humans stared. Then Parker turned back. We'll assist, but you must grasp something about humans. We come from a world where nearly everything can kill you. The climate, the wildlife, even the smallest pathogens. We survived by fighting. That's in our nature. Lane's forearms performed a complex motion. What do you mean, Captain? I mean that our methods could alarm you. We won't merely try to block the swarm, we'll annihilate it. Several aliens recoiled, one emitting a noise like boiling liquid. You speak of genocide? Collins inquired, crystal surface pulsing rapidly. I speak of continued existence, Parker responded, for you and us both, because if the swarm keeps growing, eventually it'll reach Earth too. The coalition gathered in hushed discussion, their voices too faint for the translation system to capture. Alternately, Lane returned. We have no option but to accept, Captain. Still, please note that violence contradicts our fundamental nature. What you call normal is something we find difficult to endure. Parker bowed his head slightly. I'll need every detail you have on the swarm, its physiology, behavior patterns, vulnerabilities, everything. Then Lane stated quietly, in that case, we must contact Earth. We'll need more ships. Once the humans left, Elder Collins addressed Lane. Have we made a dreadful error? These beings seem as hazardous as the swarm itself. Lane observed the departing humans, whose heavy footsteps echoed through the hallway. Possibly, but the swarm gives us no other choice. We can only hope these Deathworlders rescue us, then depart once their task is done. Within the Terminus laboratory, Dr. Megan Harper was busily analyzing void swarm samples provided by the Coalition. It had been 3 days since Parker's status report was sent, prompting an immediate response from Earth. In short order, 5 additional battleships and a research vessel carrying experts in bioweaponry arrived. Remarkable, Dr. Harper murmured, adjusting her microscope. Their cellular composition is unlike anything I've ever studied. Lieutenant Brooks, watching her work, asked, Can you pinpoint a weakness? Dr. Harper glanced up, eyes gleaming with curiosity. Certainly, everything has a flaw. These creatures are linked by a biological network, essentially a hive mind, but their rapid proliferation exacts a toll. On the bridge, Parker conferred with Ambassador Lane and Elder Collins while viewing a hologram charting the swarm's approach to core Coalition planets. Evacuate these 3 systems immediately, Parker instructed, indicating planets in the swarm's path. Lane shuddered. That's 11 billion people. We lack the capacity to move them all. Then we buy you time, Parker declared, switching to a strategic layout. We'll form a defensive barrier here at the Cygnus Gap, a natural choke point. Elder Collins's crystal surface dimmed. You plan to confront the swarm directly. Our technology can't wound them. Ours can, Parker said firmly, and Dr. Harper believes she's found a biological vulnerability we can exploit. Right on cue, Harper arrived carrying a small container. Captain, I've developed a targeted pathogen. It attacks the swarm's singular biology, while sparing other organisms. She placed it on the table. This is a sample. We'll need large-scale production. Lane backed away. You engineered a disease on purpose? A biological weapon? Harper nodded. Specifically for the swarm. Elder Collins's voice rose in pitch. "Life turned into a weapon. That's forbidden. We cannot sanction such a thing." Parker's tone hardened. "The swarm is slaughtering billions of your people. Would you rather stand by your ethics or live?" Silence gripped the bridge until Lane spoke quietly. "How would it be deployed?" Dr. Harper activated the simulation. "We load it into missile warheads. Upon impact, it spreads in an aerosol. Infection sets in, crippling the swarm's cellular processes and stopping reproduction. Infected units die in hours, and they also transfer the pathogen to others in the hive." "That means obliterating trillions of beings," Elder Collins protested. "Beings that are devouring your worlds," Lieutenant Brooks countered. The conversation halted abruptly when the comms officer announced, "Captain, the Earth fleet just arrived. General Patterson requests a meeting." Within hours, the human reinforcements had assembled at the Cygnus Gap, 6 battleships forming a barrier, while behind them the research ship mass-produced Dr. Harper's agent. Coalition representatives observed in a mix of awe and dread as the humans prepared for combat with an efficiency that revealed ample practice: weapon checks, fighter fueling, missile loading with the biological agent. "The swarm's first wave will arrive in 12 hours, General Patterson said at the final briefing. "We'll hold them back and deploy the pathogen. If Harper's correct, we'll see the effects in days." Ambassador Lane addressed the human officers gravely. "For 3 millennia, our coalition has existed without warfare. Your approach defies our core principles, but we have no option. We're grateful, though what you do terrifies us." Parker responded gently. "Sometimes to preserve life, we must face what we fear, Ambassador." 3 days later, the initial confrontation with the swarm began. Human ships fired missiles into the bio-cloud. The pathogen dispersed as Dr. Harper had designed. For the first time, the void swarm withdrew. The planet Helios rotated slowly under a crimson sun. Formerly home to over 5 million coalition citizens, it now served as the front line for humanity's campaign against the void swarm. Coalition vessels orbited above, evacuating civilians while the human fleet set up a defensive ring. Lieutenant Mark Rivers stood at the edge of the landing zone, watching the last transports fill. His armor was battered from 3 weeks of combat. Around him, 50 human troops checked their weapons and gear. How many remained for evacuation? Rivers asked the coalition official, an insectoid named Carson. "About 6,000, Carson answered, mandibles jittering anxiously. But sensors detect the swarm drawing closer from the north. They've adapted to the pathogen sooner than predicted." Rivers grimaced. Dr. Harper's invention had been immensely effective initially, but the swarm was evolving. Each new iteration displayed greater resistance. "We'll hold them," Rivers reassured. "Get your people onto those transports." Carson's compound eyes gleamed with the setting sun. "You can't possibly halt them with so few." Rivers simply gripped his rifle. "We're not like you. We're used to rough odds." The radio crackled. "Lieutenant, we've spotted swarm forms 5 miles away, closing fast. Take position." Rivers commanded his troops, remember, target the node clusters. They're still exposed there. The humans spread across a ridge overlooking the evac zone. Helios's severe environment, thin air, punishing gravity, scorching heat, had already claimed 2 lives from Rivers' team, but the survivors adjusted, exploiting the harsh setting in their favor. "They're visible now." Sergeant Barnes shouted from her lookout. "There must be thousands." Rivers raised his binoculars. The horizon darkened with an advancing wave of chitinous bodies rippling like fluid over the rock. "Wait until they cross the boundary," Rivers instructed, "then unleash everything." As the leading swarm units crossed the invisible line, Rivers gave the signal. The ridge erupted in gunfire and explosives, tearing through the alien mass. For each cluster destroyed, 10 more pressed forward. "They're interpreting our attack pattern," Barnes yelled over the clamor, adjusting formation. Observing as the swarm split into 3 groups, 1 frontal assault, 2 flanking, Rivers realized they'd never done that before. "They're learning." A young soldier asked, voice trembling, "So what do we do, Lieutenant?" Noting the ravines on either side, Rivers ordered Barnes, "Take your squad to the eastern canyon, Jackson, handle the west. Plant explosives. We'll funnel them up the middle." Quickly the squads maneuvered into the ravines, aided by the planet's high gravity. The rest of Rivers' men intensified their barrage at the center, attracting the swarm's focus. The plan succeeded. The swarm poured into the middle, steering clear of the flanking ravines. Once the side groups were in place, Rivers signaled. Twin blasts shook the terrain, burying hundreds of swarm creatures beneath collapsing rock and shutting off their approach. Concentrated fire annihilated the central group. For 3 hours, the humans held their ground. Transport ships lifted off, filled with civilians. Human losses were severe, 20 dead, 15 injured. The last transport is up, Carson radioed. All non-combatants are safe. Rivers surveyed the exhausted, wounded remnants of his team. Fall back to extraction, we'd done it. Human dropships arrived to retrieve them. As Rivers took a final glance at the battlefield, the swarm consolidated again, regrouping for another wave. They paused, Barnes remarked, stunned. They're not retreating, Rivers corrected. They're evolving. They'll be fiercer next time. On the Coalition flagship, Ambassador Lane observed the human survivors arrive. How many did you lose? 40%, Rivers answered bluntly, but we saved the colony. Lane performed a complex forearm gesture. We've never witnessed such sacrifice. Your ways of battle are beyond our comprehension. Removing his damaged helmet, Rivers replied, That's why you summoned us, Ambassador. Sometimes you need those who know how to fight impossible odds. Dr. Harper had not slept for 3 days. Her makeshift lab on the research vessel Infinity had become both her prison and her salvation. Under harsh fluorescence, she studied fresh swarm samples, her alarm growing at their mounting resilience to her pathogen. They're adapting at astonishing speed, she told Captain Parker during a rushed meeting. Our original agent is now only 30% effective. Parker's fatigue was evident in his taut expression. We can't keep playing defense. Each fallback costs the Coalition another world. General Patterson, present via HoloLink, affirmed, Recon found what we suspect to be the main breeding site on a planet wholly overrun in the Vega region. Harper looked up from her data. If I can get fresh specimens from the source, I might engineer a new agent they haven't adjusted to yet. Parker studied the star chart. That's deep in swarm territory. We'll need an entire strike group. Then that's what we'll send, Patterson resolved. Captain Parker, you'll command. The Coalition will handle logistics. Your goal is to get Dr. Harper onto that breeding planet and retrieve her samples. Ambassador Lane, silent until then, spoke quietly. We'll assist, but we cannot fight. We have no soldiers. We don't need you to fight, Parker reassured. Just get us there. We'll take it from there. 3 days onward, the grandest fleet in Coalition history surged towards swarm space. 6 human battleships leading hundreds of Coalition cargo and support vessels. The mission was straightforward but precarious. Break through the outer defenses, reach the breeding planet, deploy Dr. Harper's team to collect data, then withdraw. On the Terminus Bridge, Parker observed the initial swarm defenses on the scanner. All ships, go to combat readiness, he instructed. Coalition vessels, stay back. This is our job. The human battleships formed up, readying their weapon arrays with deadly efficiency. The swarm flung thousands of lesser units to encircle them. They'd never displayed such coordination, Lieutenant Brooks commented. They're evolving tactically. Then we'll adapt to, Parker responded. Execute pattern Delta, focus on their largest clumps. The humans split formation, each warship choosing a unique vector of attack. Their combined firepower carved openings in the swirling ocean of creatures. Main cannon primed, the weapons officer said. Concentrate on their center mass and fire, Parker ordered. The Terminus lurched as its primary weapon discharged, an intense energy beam slicing through the swarm, eradicating thousands in an instant. The other human ships followed suit, forging a path forward. For 6 hours, the battle raged across space. 2 human vessels were overwhelmed, though their crews escaped aboard Coalition ships, but the plan succeeded. They reached the breeding planet. We're in position, Parker relayed to Dr. Harper. You got 1 hour on the surface. Escorted by fighters, the science team descended through a chaotic sky onto a planet wholly consumed by the hive. This used to be mountains and oceans, Harper told her colleagues, but now it's a single monstrous mass. We'll get samples from multiple areas. Almost immediately, newly evolved, heavily armored swarm units erupted from the ground. We've got incoming, one guard warned, brand new swarm variant. Let's get these samples on the ship. Despite valiant efforts, 2 researchers were lost. Harper barely made it back with the vital specimens. In orbit, Parker faced an agonizing choice. Launch the Nova bombs. Aim at the primary hive structures. Nuclear blasts rained onto the planet, each detonation flaring brighter than its sun. Did we succeed? Patterson asked through comms. Parker observed the readouts. We inflicted serious damage, but they're already regenerating. Harper cradled her sample case. I have what I need. This will suffice. As the fleet withdrew, Parker glanced back at the planet. Humanity had delivered the swarm its first major blow, but the toll was huge, hundreds of human fatalities and 2 lost ships. "We can't do that again," he confided to Patterson in private. "Whatever Harper's final solution is, it has to succeed. We're out of resources and time." The coalition flagship Silent Dawn's war room had never been so congested. Delegates from 17 species gathered around a display, watching as the red region signifying the swarm crept steadily toward their central systems. Dr. Harper's improved agent delayed them by 3 weeks, Parker said wearily, but they've evolved immunity again. Ambassador Lane's once iridescent complexion had turned ashen. "It means we are defeated. Our coalition has endured 3,000 years, yet now we face annihilation." Silence enveloped them. 6 weeks of punishing conflict had claimed nearly a third of the humans' expeditionary force. The coalition had lost 11 worlds, billions either dead or fleeing. Every victory was fleeting, each setback irreversible. "Not necessarily," Dr. Harper interjected, moving forward. She looked ragged from days of sleeplessness. "I've been examining the swarm's energy behavior. They follow thermal emissions, guiding them to targets." Parker frowned. "We already knew that." "Yes, but I'm thinking bigger," Harper insisted, switching the display to show a gas giant on the coalition outskirts, labeled Hyperion. "It's mostly hydrogen and helium, perfect for large-scale fusion." Elder Collins's crystals glowed with puzzlement. "Your proposal?" Harper inhaled. "We transform Hyperion into a temporary star, igniting a contained fusion reaction that releases a tremendous thermal surge." "You demolish an entire planet?" Lane asked, voice shaking. "Not demolish, ignite," Harper explained. "A massive thermal beacon. The entire swarm would converge on Hyperion, and once enough have gathered, we detonate the planetary core." Parker picked up her line of thought. "It'd simulate a miniature supernova, killing everything within half a light year." Pandemonium erupted among the council. "That's insanity," Elder Collins shouted. "Hyperion's moons have labs. Its neighboring systems would be bombarded by radiation. We cannot cause such destruction." Worn from constant fighting, Parker responded bluntly, "In 15 days, the swarm hits your homeworlds. Will you let billions die for the sake of moral purity? The swarm won't reciprocate." General Patterson's hologram flickered. "We've exhausted every other tactic. The swarm counters everything we do. This might be our final shot." Lane stepped to the center, silencing further outbursts. "I have seen humans lay down their lives for strangers. Their methods trouble us, but their commitment is genuine." He turned to Collins. "We must consider Dr. Harper's plan." For 6 hours, the debate raged, and coalition experts scrutinized Harper's calculations for alternatives. There were none. Harper oversaw preparations aboard the Terminus, verifying that the operation's success hinged on faultless timing. "Someone must arm the catalyst in person after verifying the swarm is converged, because the radiation will block remote triggers." Parker assessed the plan, realizing it was suicidal. "I'll have that team," he said. "But Captain," Harper began, "the odds of survival." "Don't matter," Parker interrupted. "We get one shot. I want to ask someone else to do it." As final steps proceeded, the swarm seemed to sense danger. Its push toward coalition centers slowed as units started drifting toward Hyperion. "It's functioning," Harper murmured, checking sensor data. "They're following the heat signal." Parker assembled a volunteer squad of 15 who understood they might not come back. Before boarding their swift infiltration craft bound for Hyperion, Ambassador Lane approached. "Your willingness to give your lives," he faltered. "In our language, there's no word for this." Parker offered a brief smile. "We call it courage, Ambassador. That's who we are." The Firebreak stealth ship neared Hyperion's swirling storms. Through the cockpit windows, Parker and his crew saw the gas giant's violent cyclones, and surrounding it, the countless swarm forms, drawn in by Dr. Harper's artificial thermal lure. The plan was advancing perfectly. "Final approach in 5 minutes," Lieutenant Brooks stated, calmly manning the controls, though she knew this was likely a one-way trip. "We'll release the catalyst devices and have about half an hour to escape." Parker turned to address the others. "If we succeed, we save the galaxy. If we fail, the swarm devours everything." No one mentioned the slim chance they'd survive. Each volunteer had accepted the cost. The Firebreak descended into Hyperion's churning atmosphere, the planet's colossal storms offering partial cover. They sidestepped patrolling swarm units. At the correct depth, the team deployed the central catalyst, a mechanism to provoke a chain reaction in Hyperion's hydrogen core. "Catalyst armed," the engineer announced. starting warm-up cycle. Checking the timer, Parker said 25 minutes to clear the blast radius. Move! Suddenly, a rogue storm system slammed into the firebreak, crippling one engine. The ship lurched, alarms shrieking. "Engine 2 offline!" Brooks cried. "We're losing lift." Rushing to the engine console, Parker demanded, "Can we reach escape velocity with one engine?" The engineer's grim look told him enough. "Not with all of us aboard, sir." Silence weighed on the bridge. The mission had become guaranteed lethal. Parker's choice was instant. Minimal crew of 5 remains. The rest escape via emergency pods. Foreseeing their protests, he continued, "That's an order. The pods have enough thrust to get you away." After a tense argument, 9 departed in the pods. Parker stayed with Brooks, the engineer, and 2 others, determined to keep the firebreak functional long enough to ensure the catalyst would detonate. 10 minutes to trigger, the engineer reported. As the final pod climbed away, the swarm detected it, redirecting thousands of units that soared toward the pods. "They're going after them," Brooks said, eyes on the redouts. Parker opened a channel. "Coalition Command, Parker here. We're exposed. Commence Operation Sunforge now." At a safe vantage point, the Coalition and human fleets watched the swarm cluster around Hyperion, drawn to the intensifying heat from the catalyst. 5 minutes to detonation, Dr. Harper said, analyzing the feed from Parker's craft. "The device is stable." Lane and Collins observed wordlessly, aware humans were about to sacrifice themselves for a galaxy that wasn't theirs. On the firebreak, Parker and his 4 crewmates fought to maintain altitude with one engine in ruins. 2 minutes, the engineer shouted. Parker keyed the final broadcast. "Captain Stephen Parker to all ships. The catalyst is stable. Detonation imminent. It's been an honor to stand with all of you, human or coalition. Remember that together we faced extinction and prevailed." With 1 minute left, a miracle occurred. The emergency systems were routed enough energy to give the broken engine a short surge of power. "We have partial thrust," Brooks exclaimed, pushing for a desperate climb. The firebreak shot upward, defying Hyperion's pull. Behind them, the catalyst reached critical mass, igniting the hydrogen core. For a fleeting instant, a second sun illuminated Coalition space, the shockwave fanning out near light speed, annihilating everything in its path. 90% of the swarm perished instantly. 3 days later, unbelievably, a battered lifeboat was retrieved by a Coalition patrol. Inside were Parker and Brooks, barely alive, survivors of the firebreak's final mission. A month on, in the Coalition Council's Grand Hall, humans stood as honored attendees. Ambassador Lane addressed the gathered delegates. "For 3,000 years, we believed that violence had no place among civilized species. The swarm showed us that survival sometimes requires a power we did not possess." He turned to Captain Parker, recovered from his injuries. "Humans demonstrated that true bravery is risking death not just for yourselves, but for those unlike you." Elder Collins's crystal radiated brilliantly. "We invite Earth to formally join the Galactic Coalition, not as ordinary members, but as guardians, a unique status for your people." Standing beside Dr. Harper and other humans, Parker dipped his head. "Earth accepts this privilege. May we learn from your wisdom as you have gained from our resilience." Throughout the Coalition's territory, memorials were built for the thousands of humans who gave their lives battling the swarm. On Earth, news that humanity was no longer alone and had already saved that universe from devastation forever altered society. Over subsequent years, the remaining swarm remnants were systematically eradicated. Coalition planets began building their own defenses, assisted by human advisors. Somewhere in the endless darkness, Coalition scientists placed a special beacon to warn others about the monstrous swarm and the even more formidable humans who triumphed over it. As Parker often said thereafter, "The universe labeled us monsters and feared our planet, but it needed monsters to protect it and found allies instead."